over now. In my first presentation, I said the word genocide, but the word is the one suffers. I say that because after all the instruments created to prevent it from happening again, it has happened and was carried out by the same government who beat their chests and defenders now. In my first presentation, I say the word genocide, but I have the word is the one suffers. I say that because after all the instruments created to prevent it from happening again, it has happened. I have you returned maybe the YouTube? Well,
yes, I'm streaming on YouTube, yes.
But I heard an echo and repeat of my audio.
No, it's okay now.
I say that all the governments chest the same government beat their chest and defenders of human rights, but it is not the only one happened the genocide in Gaza, in Palestine, after this Western instrument. Also in Artsakh, in Spanish is Nagorno-Karabakh, but it's the Republic of Artsakh, in Darfur, in Sudan, or in Burma with the Rohingyas. In addition to people of Kurds, Sahrawis, Syrians, and also native peoples of all America, especially North America. I must make this mistake. It is not the word, the unique genocide. Using social network, we can see every day the suffering of its victims in Artsakh, in Darfur, in Burma, in Sahara, in Palestine. Every day the suffering of its victims transmitted in live by its protagonists, and the worst pictures and audio of the cruelty and evil of its victimizers. In that instance, all the treaties, all the documents, and all the organizations created for the defense of human rights that we are going to study theoretically in this course have failed. Not because of the supporting of the people, not because of the support that is seen in football stadiums, in Celtic of Glasgow, yesterday in Galatasaray of Turkey, in Real Sociedad, in Osasuna of Spain, in the popular gatherings, artists, a lot of artists in San Remo Festival, or in universities, but because of the policies of powerful governments. I am referring to the countries and institutions that are complicit and therefore also perpetrators of the current genocide, due to their support for the policies of war crimes and criminal authorities. Many of them are hypocrites and servile. I said at the past ceremony in India that is very difficult to speak in another language, but cynical would be the word. For example, I say the European Union, which was born with very different ideals from the World Organization, it has become also the United Nations Security Council, the Inter-American Organization, we in silence, and so many more. I repeat, to the government and not to the population. This has resulted in the crash of all the theoretical instruments, all the academic instruments, treaties, declarations, charters, and regulation, along with the institution and all the international organizations that were created to assist and support human rights. It is very sad to see this because in France, there was a declaration of the rights of man and the citizens, and the United States with the letter from San Francisco, and at its headquarters of the United Nations in New York, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but it's precisely those who beat their chests talking about their defense and protection who turn out to be the main perpetrators of the wars, for me, crimes and atrocities that we are seeing today. For this reason, the best effort we can make to stop it and prevent it is to inform ourselves, to understand and act to spread the value of human rights, not in a later and punitive level, but in a preventive level before violations occur. Of course, I wanted to say this to establish it and the principle and that from now we begin to see that all the theoretical instruments, all the academic instruments, the treaties, declarations, charters, and regulations, together with the institution and all the international organizations created for the aid and support of human rights. Having clarified that point, I will begin with a little history. By way of introduction, we can say that human rights as a legal and philosophical concept have evolved substantially since the late 18th century. Although their roots can be traced back to earlier philosophical and religious traditions, the period of 1789 onwards marked a crucial turning point in their development, with the promulgation of the Declaration of Rights of Man and the Citizen in France. This document laid the groundwork for the recognition of rights as inherent to all people and promoted principles such as liberty, equality, and fraternity. Since then, human rights have experienced a process of expansion and consolidation at a global level. The origin in the human rights, in the share, in the sense that we understand them are practices that are developing daily at all times and in the planet. And all our practices are development daily at all times and in all places, and are not reduced to a single normative, philosophical, or institutional dimension, not to a single historical moment that gives them an origin, of course. When I say the idea of fundamental rights, here. As we conceive them today, was formulated for Marcus Tullius Cicero in the 1st century before Christ, deepened by the theological concepts of Christianity and its secularization in 17th century, with more limited intermediate formulations in the medieval natural law of St. Thomas Aquino, addressed to the authorities as a simple morality duty, and for example, in Rousseau's theory of democracy. Cicero in Rome advocated the right to life, the right to security, and the right to happiness, for example, while Locke supported the right to property. But at the same time, he would show the conceptual germ of which the current selective criterion would prosper in the context of human right. What is essential to this concept of natural rights? First of all, they are linked to the idea of human condition or humanity, independent of the laws of a given society, not judged by the threat of falsity and recognized to all the members of human society, regardless to their natural or cultural difference, because they are of different origin and have a universal character. Recognition of the dignity of the human person is the main foundation of the concept of human rights. The idea of human dignity is manifested in the elevated and identical status of each person, and is expressed in the fact that at birth each person also acquires the identity of humanity, becoming by that condition a member of a race, not of a nation, not of a religion, but of the whole of all human beings who exist. The Declaration of the Right of Man and of the Citizen in 1789 have an historical concept. The French Revolution represented a key moment in the history of human rights. This movement emerged as a response to the oppression exerted by the absolute monarchy and the deeply rooted social inequalities of the ancien regime. Inspired by the ideas of the Illustration, the revolution sought to transform political and social structure to guarantee equality and citizen participation. Authors such Montesquieu, Rousseau, and Voltaire influenced the declaration of the principles underlying modern human rights. The Declaration of the Right of Man and of the Citizen, approved by the National Constituent Assembly in August 1789, was a direct response to the injustice and social discontent. This document was inspired by previous texts, such, for example, as the Declaration of Independence of the United States in 1776, and thought to establish a number of universal rights that would guarantee human dignity in the face of abuse of power. The main content of the French Declaration proclaimed fundamental rights such as liberty, equality before the law, property, security, and resistance to oppression. It also established essential principles for the functioning of the state, such as separation of powers and national sovereignty, defining the law is the expression of the general will. These principles not only challenges traditional power structures, but also laid the groundwork for modern constitution. The development of human rights in the 19th century, for example, the influence of liberalisms during the 19th century, liberalism played a central role in the promotion of human rights. These movements linked to the defense of individual liberties and the limitation of state power inspired the drafting of the new constitution in Europe and in all Latin America. For us, for example, the Constitution of Cádiz in Spain in 1812, for example, included principles of equality and fundamental rights, although its application was limited by the political tensions with Spain and France and all the new countries in Latin America of the time of the conquest of Spain in America, and the conflict from Spain and France with Napoleon. But the Constitution of Cádiz is a good example for these fundamental rights. The moment of constitutionalism in America and Europe marked a tendency towards the codification of rights in legal documents, although the rights recognized were often restricted to certain sectors of the population, such, for example, as men with property, etc. Not the women, not the children, not the strangers. An important point here in the share is the abolition of slavery, one of the great advances in human rights during the 19th century was the abolition of slavery. This process was driven by abolitionist movements in Europe, in America, as well by the growing influence of the egalitarian principles of the French Revolution. Britain led this effort by passing the Slavery Abolition Act in 1933, followed by France in 1865, here in Argentina, 1853, and the United States in the 1865 in aftermath of the Civil War. However, the process was uneven and faces significant resistance, particularly in economics that depend of the slave labor. The abolition of slavery not only represented a step toward the recognition of equality, but also debates about the civil and the political rights of freedmen. In relation, the third in the slide, the relation to labor and social rights, the rise of the Industrial Revolution led to precarious working conditions and massive exploitation of workers. Long working hours, the absence of safety regulation, and child labor, for example, led to social protests and the formulation of labor movements. Inspired by ideologies such as socialism and anarchism, these movements demanded reforms that would guarantee labor rights. In several countries, such as Germany, for example, the first labor law included the regulation of working hours and the introduction of social insurance under the leadership of Otto von Bismarck in the 1880s. Simultaneously, the creation of trade unions, strengthened by the collective struggles for better working conditions. The founding, for example, of the International Labour Organization in 1919 consolidated the recognition of labor rights as an integral part of human rights. The expansion of civil and political rights in the 19th century also saw a gradual expansion of civil and political rights. Although initially restricted to economic and social elites, struggle for universal suffrage, for example, marked very, very important milestones in countries such as the United Kingdom, where the suffrage movement led by women challenges traditional norm of political exclusion. In Latin America, independence gave rise to new constitutions that, although often limited in their practical application, recognition fundamental principles of equality and citizenship. The internalization of human rights in the 20th century. For example, the League of Nations and the interwar period following the end of the First World War, the international community recognized the need to create bodies to promote peace and prevent future conflicts. The League of Nations was founded in 1919 and represented the first attempt to establish an international structure to ensure cooperation between states and foster respect for fundamental rights. Although its scope was limited by the exclusion of key powers, such, for example, the United States, and the lack of effective enforcement mechanisms, the League did advance important initiatives for the protection of minorities and assistance to refugees. For example, the Nansen Passport, I remember, laying the groundwork for future development in human rights. During this period, international treaties also emerged that addressed specific issues such as, for example, human trafficking and forced labor, reflecting a gradual recognition of the need for international regulation to protect the human dignity. However, the interwar years were marked by growing political tensions and the rise of totalitarian regimes that ignored or violated this fundamental principle in Salazar in Portugal, Franco in Spain, Mussolini in Italy, Stalin in the Soviet Union, of course in Germany, but this was completed, the Society of Nations, with a vision of the role for the state after the end in the 20th century. The 20th century was called the century of wars, with 2 hot episodes and 1 cold, and where the support of human dignity is observed. The horrors of the Second World War of both sides of the conflict, not only Germany, United States, in Japan, England in Dresden, in Hamburg, the Soviet Union, for example, the both sides of the conflict, and the desire to ensure that it would not happen again inspired the concept of human rights in the letter of San Francisco on Jan 26, 1945, which only affirms the letter of San Francisco only affirms its faith in fundamental human rights, although it does not define them. The seed was planted as a few years later, in 1945, the General Assembly of United Nations promulgated the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and in 1966 proclaimed a civil declaration of and political, civil and political rights, together with economic, social, and cultural rights, which would also achieve international character. They open the way for the legal rule of law, which began with the Declaration of France and the United States, to the constitutional rule of law, which affirms that the disregard for human rights states leads to wars, dictatorships, and violence, and that these rights must be respected. The most important rights is, of course, the right to life. This right is pertinent and applicable to all people, regardless for their cultural origin, political ideology, sexual orientation, skin color, or geographical location. In this way, after difficult and wonderful process of collective legal construction, different international instruments for the protection of the human person were finally born. While each historical regimes determines which human rights should and should not be abstracted from the international treaty, we can distinguish three basic components that emerge from them. Who has civil rights? What spheres of social life do the implicit human rights cover? And what is the practical content of such rights? Obviously, each type of rights that arise from the international pact, civil, political, social, and cultural, has specific answers to these questions. Science adherence to them and the formulation of right is the product, of course, of the state, its leadership, and the result of the struggle of society for their rights. As a jurist author, Rudolf von Jhering, said at University of Vienna, in the struggle, you will find your right. The development of international treaties and mechanisms, the second point. Following the Universal Declaration, the international community continued to make progress in creating binding legal instruments. This includes the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, adopted in the 1966 and collectively now as International Bill of Human Rights. This covenant established specific obligations for the state and supervisory mechanisms, such committees of expert charged with monitoring their compliance. Regional body also emerged as a Council of Europe, which adopted the European Convention of Human Rights in 1950, and in America, the Organization of American States, which approved the American Convention of Human Rights in 1969. This instrument supported the protection of the human right at the regional level and allowed for the development of supervisory system and specialized court, such, for example, as the European Court, and here in America, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. The contemporary development of and current challenges. International treaties. Following the Universal Declaration, like I said, binding treaties such as International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights were adopted. These treaties consolidated human rights as binding on signatory state. The next period was the expansion of rights. In the recent decades, new rights have been recognized relating to issues such as the environment, for example, women's rights, indigenous people's rights, and sexual rights, and sexual diversity. These advances reflected a dynamic evolution that responds to the challenges of modern societies. But what are the current challenges in the post-situation? Since then, human rights have been the subject of political games and strong of ideological discourse. Some are applied and some others are marginalized states, depending on very different circumstances, were dragged into the game of political rise during the cold episode of the century of war. This can be evidenced in particular by the fact that previously in the condition of the bipolar war, the normative essence of the international law was predetermined by the agreement of will of several states and partially by the will of other subjects of the international law regulating certain specific legal relations. Today, in the condition of globalization and unipolarity of the world, the interests and will of the United States and its subordinate European Union, the United Kingdom, and other allies temporarily dominate over the interests of other states subject to international law. An interesting effort to oppose it is the BRICS, for example, to which Argentina, despite being invited, rejected sadly. India, Brazil, Russia, China, and other states, in case where the dominant power, for the one reason or another, fails to influence the international community in the direction it desired, it nevertheless acts in spite of everything and anything, including experience shows the common sense of protecting human rights by imposing its own selfish while and the inherent interest by using force or by not caring about violation that international legal principle. It is clear that the so-called progress in the human right does not transcend the discourse beyond the real commitment of those who accept it, constituting a meta-narrative of overwhelming consequence. We can see this obviously in recent public events, such as the support and the defense of apartheid policies in Turkey, in Iraq, in Sudan, in Congo, in Kurdistan, in Spanish Sahara, war crime and genocide with Rohingya people, in Gaza, in Palestine, of the shameful and capitulating position of the bellicose European Union and the United States in the United Nations Security Council against the ceasefire, for example, in Palestine. It can be said in conclusion that 70, 89 human rights have come a long way from being national principles to becoming universal standards recognized by international community. While they have evolved and expanded to include new areas, they also face challenges that require constant attention. In a globalized and technological world, human rights remain fundamental to ensuring dignity and justice for all the people. I don't have the time, of course. I don't have much time, but I want to tell you briefly. I explained in my last book here reasons to kill. I was 3 postdoctorates. In my first postdoctorate in Argentina, I wrote 3 books in Spanish and 1 in Italian. In my second postdoc in Italy, I wrote 3 books in Italian and 1 in Spanish, new technologies and law. But in the last postdoctorate, I could only write 1 because it is so painful, so hard to think, to see, and in addition of that, to write these things that was impossible, very, very impossible for me. So to close this presentation, I'm going to read you what I wrote in the book here to now how you think. But I think that a serious problem with human rights for me is that they have an exclusively Western design based on Western values and in Western ideas. The ideas of the human rights approach adapted to the context. The concept of human rights is the standard by which we analyze and evaluate the action of our government, measured of our standing of the morality of our common life as rational and reasonable beings, and a criterion for international solidarity. Although it is taken for granted that human rights are understood, there is some confusion about their true meaning. Almost everyone uses human rights to fight injustice, to demand equal and dignified treatment, and to denounce abuse against some people. But very few people can explain clearly what the meaning of human rights. Human rights safety, for example, argue that there is fundamental conflict between human rights and national obligation, and the objection that they reflect a Western secular bias of a pride of Europe, which seems to have emptied itself of the very thing on which its identity is based. The above questions lead to an important question about the understanding of human rights. Should human rights be understood in a particular context, be it political, economic, or cultural, or in other words, should human rights discourse be historically contingent? If so, is there not a risk that they will lose the universal character? For a large majority of the doctrine of the juridical doctrine of human rights are understood as moral and legal precept because they have more to do with the kind of society and world in which feeling being good simply wish to live under those rights. In our opinion, this sense of approaching human rights only as a legal or moral right do not reflect their full meaning and scope, and fails the success of their realization. Several authors critical of the current body of human rights, who question the universality, argue that human rights reflect and support Western culture and worldview, which sometimes diverge from non-Western culture. If we recognize that human rights have more to do with the kind of world we want to live in, the construction of that world, an approach that takes into account the diversity of cultural and political perspective. Otherwise, human rights will be perceived as an imposition of Western culture on the rest of the world. In this direction, non-Western authors argue that official human rights are a corpus derived from European predicates claim to supplant all other traditions. By rejecting them, it claims to be the sole genius of the good society. The belief that human rights are the exclusive expression of Western culture overlook the use of human rights as a perspective from which to live dignified life. European authors were the first to formulate the idea of human rights because of the obvious commitment by their own governments, but it doesn't mean that they are the monopoly of Western cultures. The emergency of human rights is not the result of a cultural inclination, but of historical circumstances that led them to formulate their characters and the declaration. And out of necessity, not superiority, they have confronted the rest of the world in the developing a global human response. In fact, I told you that the use of the term human rights dates back to the recent past by the atrocities on both sides of the conflict in World War II, but this does not mean that human rights being and did not have human rights before this event. Of course, the debate of human rights should not so much be about the genesis or about the origin of the discourse of the content of human rights after and their codification in the official documents, but about their specific and concrete realization for individual human beings in flesh and blood, as there is a little evidence that international treaties led to an increase in people's well-being or respect the rights. Finish reading the book. From the book, should there be a specific list of rights for all contexts and all circumstances, or should human rights be understood within a specific political framework. In other words, should human rights discourse be historically and geopolitically conditioned? Commonly, and from a theoretical point of view, human rights are usually now associated with what certain philosophers or jurists, Santo Tomás, Cicero, Rousseau, Locke, Montesquieu, Voltaire, that these philosophers, that jurists have told us through historical history, forgetting the details that they are historical production generated by social actors who are theorized in a formal and abstract way as mechanism for the production of norm. Also, as already noted, an important facet of human rights is the process of institutionalization and normative recognition at both national and international level. Obviously, the standard of the core human rights instruments and treaties must be valued and at the same time evolved according to specific context and the concrete needs of individuals. What Bobbio calls the process of specification of human rights produce relevant changes in the initial model of generalization of human rights and their subsequent expansion, since it both will its recognition of right to specific subjects and groups in particular situation. Is this yes, in these slides. It was a first step toward achieving an idea of material equality beyond the abstract formality of all free and equal in dignity and rights to some specific social groups that are the so-called disadvantaged or vulnerable or weak subjects, and constitute sectors that are in the special situation, lack of protection, causing a vulnerability that must be overcome. Nevertheless, the fact that human rights are reduced to a formal treaties, abstract norm, institution, and theories lead to a kind of vicarious delegation that focuses on the protagonism attributed to the states and the courts charged with interpreting this norm. We should not be satisfied with the legal specialist, legal operator, and ultimately national or international court of justice telling us what our rights are. In whichever dimension, then and only concern ourselves with the post-violation state, which is limited to the sphere of the judicial claim. When they have reality already been violated, in the end, what we are consolidating is a simplest, deficient, insufficient, and narrow culture of human rights. Face it, this excessively juridical, positive, formalist, ex post facto conception of their violation and merely delegative under an individualistic legal culture, we propose, from a theoretical point of view, of course, a broader notion of human rights than the normative procedural one. We need a relational and dynamic one that is built on the basis of de facto social practices and concrete human actions. We believe that their effective exercise is reflected in the practices that take place on the daily basis at all times and in all the place, and are not reduced to a single normative, philosophical, or institutional dimension, not to a single historical moment that gave rise to them, although they also have an impact on our imaginary and on our sensitivity to human rights. For this and other reasons, we intend to highlight emphasize the limits of the excessive normativism and formalist positions. we repeat, although the philosophical, institutional, and legal state effectiveness dimension of human rights are very, very important and necessary, but they are insufficient. To open and establish and promote the general comprehensive culture of human rights that emphasize the pre-violatory dimension from where they are constructed and articulated, because in reality, we are all human beings, wherever we move, who, using or not the legal route, participate in the processes of construction or destruction of human rights. Here, the pre-violation dimension. I believe that this will be the only way to avoid continuing to see the image of horror we have seen in recent days, of crying children, orphaned minors isolated in hospitals without electricity, hungry, searching in tears from their fathers and mothers, lacking from food, from the rubbish, lacking of assistance and all human understanding as we watch a powerful army with tanks, warship, and wider missiles destroying the life of many unique and irreplaceable individuals as each of one. It's very, very hard to see these shares, these screens in the children as very, very, very sad, this number, this situation in the world of today. And as anticipated, in addition to this genocide in action, both Arsaj, for example, in Spanish, Nagorno-Karabakh, Darfur, in Sudan, the Rohingyas people in Burma are suffering persecution, ethnic cleansing, and discrimination. In Arsaj, the Armenian population are Christians. The Rohingyas genocide in Burma are Muslims. And Darfur in Sudan, the people are Black. Let's not forget humanity. Let's not forget these children's, all these children's you can see. And the children's are names, are individuals, are human beings. Don't forget these children, don't forget their names, and taking action to protect human rights. The girl to remember in them that this never, but never again we have to see this situation. Thank you very much for your time and for your patience in my dissertation.
It's really an honor to host you, dear Pablo. I'm really sorry just it was we start and therefore we did not introduce you as properly. Can you briefly share your experience as a human rights defender and a professor of law? And by doing that, I have a question. I have 3 questions in YouTube, and I have one question from me. And you do know that we are. It's a point of from the educational view, and at the same time from my experience. How do you think? How do geopolitical interests nowadays shape international responses to human rights violences?
It's very difficult, but all the people support the human rights. A lot of people suffer the human rights by the government. quite in silent for different situation, political situation, powerful situation, economic situation, and chess and beat the chess and say only words, but the suffering, the dolor, the pain, the cry of all the people is in the side of this situation. It's very painful, but our unique possibility is to say this, to support the situation, to teach the situation, but it's very, in my situation in Latin America, we have a country open for the immigration, for example, but the racism, the discrimination, what I can speak about this, I can share only data in social media photos, I can an individual boycott to the trace, to the firm that support the genocide, we fight arms. My country of birth, Argentina, and my country of blood, Italy, have an awful positions about the situation, and I denounce it. I participate in media. It's very difficult. It's very difficult. We can make to this situation. It's my only response at this moment. Sorry, I get the presentation in the chat for all the.
Okay, perfect. It's amazing. I know that we actually have to teach new generation, and I know that is everything the basement in theory. But how do you think maybe it's time somehow make a pause and look at this draft of the human rights and start to move from the theory to practice? From theory.
Yes, of course. The new generations are very, very theory of human rights, and in the practice are better of us. But we must increase the practical participation. It not only rights that in Spanish say the papel mojado, wet paper, that is inutile to say. Where is the Organization of Inter-American Countries? Where is the United States, the United Nations Council of Security? Where is the Council of Europe? Where is the Human Rights Committee? Where?
Okay. Okay. Coming for this, I have another question. Can the role, the mediation of diplomacy play in resolving large-scale human rights crises?
Yes. No, yes, of course, yes. There are a lot of little examples. You, for example, the IAMPE, the last convention in Cyprus, in Cyprus, for example, Medianos in Italy, a lot of things that make Ortiz and Freddy in Peru. No, yes, I think that is a good point of view. It's a rich possibility, the mediation, searching the peace. I think that.
Pablo?
And the realization of a lot of possibilities to peacemakers in the mediation, in the resolution of conflict, but only in individual level. It's very hard to put in a government level, but it's a good situation. Yes. I think that yes.
This is the future. I think this is a start.
Yes. No, not the future, the unique future.
Unique. Bravo.
Yes.
Unique future. So we are moving smoothly, but our direction is correct. And if our guest, because from YouTube I have some correlation, can human rights be balanced with the state sovereignty and national security concerns? I think this person was it's painful a good question, but You can answer, Pablo.
No, yes. I say Araceli, for example, but it's a serious conflict if the whole concept of the sovereignty of state and the human rights violation. Yes.
Araceli, please ask. You can ask in Spanish because our Pablo, thank God, he speaks in Spanish. He understands.
Yes, of course. It's very difficult. Spanish is a beautiful language with a lot of words. English is a contextual language. Yes.
Buenos días, Pablo. Buenos días con todos. Felicitarte por tu presentación muy buena, aunque las imágenes muy fuertes y muy crudas, las últimas, pero es una realidad que estamos viviendo todo el mundo. Yo tengo dos preguntas que las iba apuntando mientras ibas pasando, son de las láminas primeras. ¿Cuál crees tú que sería posible garantizar el respeto directamente de los derechos humanos únicamente con los acuerdos internacionales? ¿O cuáles serían más los otros factores que pueden influir? Esa es la primera pregunta. Y la segunda, ¿cómo se podría implementar los desafíos principales en la implementación de los tratados internacionales sobre los derechos humanos directamente en la actualidad?
She asked me the same two questions that you make, Cristina. The theoretical level and the reality in the human faces, and the possibility to implement all these theoretical treaties in the reality of human beings. Sí, a mí me parece que, por supuesto que es muy importante la gran cantidad de tratados que hay de derechos humanos, pero sabemos que eso no baja a la práctica, salvo con conceptos teóricos. I say that it's a lot of normative, a lot of treaties, a lot of chart, but it's very difficult that this treaty applied in the reality of human, on concrete human beings. Y la posibilidad, como dijo Cristina, la implementación a través de mediación, a través de organizaciones no gubernamentales, para tratar de acercar la posibilidad de que esa gente defienda su derecho antes de que las violaciones ocurran. Pero tú lo sabes que es muy difícil. ¿Cuánto le cuesta a los pueblos originarios de Ecuador defender los ríos, defender la naturaleza, defender el ambiente? ¿Cuánto le cuesta en Brasil, en Argentina, que somos países abiertos, que tenemos una corte interamericana que teóricamente los protege? Entonces, lo que sirve, por lo menos para mí, es el pequeño ejemplo individual de construir día a día la solidaridad y la manifestación de los derechos humanos a las personas que más sufren. Pero es muy difícil, muy difícil. My answer is
I thank God I understood a bit Spanish because, the Latin language which unite all lawyers here.
yes,
When
yes.
you know Latin language, it's easier to understand the Spanish and Italian as well. And I do believe I do agree with you, but the problem I investigated, the problem nowadays that all of these international treaties are contradict with each other. And where we will find a middle, golden middle, this, or maybe platinum rule by composite from the country, from platinum rule to the golden middle. And we find that they try to implement the nature and understand the nature of the human rights. Maybe we will come to the peace. This is the reality, how I see, this is my vision.
Yes, it's a true possibility. It's not the better way, it's the unique way. Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much, Pablo. If nobody has a question, Freddy, please.
Okay.
To all of you, excuse me, my service of internet was failing. I'm very sad about this, but I want to congratulate Pablo because he's a hero in defense of human rights. He's a very good person, and I suppose the first characteristics for to defend human rights is to have a very good soul, to have a very good heart, and not to think only in yourself, to think in others too, to be really empathetic with others. En español, le quiero decir que es una gran persona, que hay que ser empáticos con los demás, que hay que mostrar una gran voluntad, a goodwill for to serve others, because this is not very easy. It's difficult. I know by my experience of defender in human rights during almost 30 years, because until now I'm suffering the results of defend human rights. Sometimes we know that there are treaties and other measures in the legal field, but as you say, Christine, the reality is different from the theory, different fields. But I want to ask Pablo, le quiero preguntar a Pablo, what do you think about your job, your work in defense of human rights? Is it possible continue for you doing that you are doing without maybe any kind of help? What is the main motivation? ¿Cuál es la principal motivación para continuar, for to continue doing this practice defense of human rights?
Help the
Good
people.
question, Freddy. Good question.
Yes, help the people, individual people. You, Lama Audi, people who are in front of in my house, in my headquarters, ayudar a la gente individualmente, a la gente única, a la gente propia que está sufriendo un problema de discriminación, como tu caso, como ayer en la metropolitana, 2 inmigrantes paraguayos que fueron discriminados en Argentina. Entonces, hacer esas pequeñas ayudas a la gente individual. Difundir, hacer mi pequeño boicot, no comprar marcas de empresas que financian genocidios, ofrecerme a entrevistas, hacer pequeñas donaciones, individualmente, uno a uno por uno. No, I say that one for one, individual people, not in the theory únicamente.
Yes, this is correct. And you see what we did today. Even this seminar is international. It's
Yes.
really equal because you are carrying the main thing. You are carrying the human language. You speak in different languages, and you are so equal with our colleague on your colleague internationally because you want to show respect.
Yes.
And this is main, Pablo, when you show respect by speaking origin language.
Yes, thank you. In December, in the meeting from IAMPE, I see people from Rohingya. Do you remember?
Yes.
Original Indians in Canada, people from Christian Armenian in Azak, a lot of Lamaudi in Palestine, in Lebanon, a lot of people who are suffering for lack of human rights. It's a great experience. Yes, and the universal language, the only language, the pride that only feel, but your own country. The Rohingya, Burma, the Canada, the Armenian in Arzach, the Latin American in our country, the Palestinian, the Lebanon, the Scotland, one incredible. Yes. This is
yes.
the respect.
And this is what unites us. You see, even without knowing your origin language, you're using body language, you're trying to learn your opponent, your colleague language in order to somehow respect. What we call this? This is the first action. It's one of the human rights. This is the action which is written in declaration. It's moral, and this is spiritually, I think, it's the first step for the dialogue. And there you prevent the first escalation of the conflict. You prevent it because you speak is the same language, you understand, and you want to hear, and them wanted to be heard. This is important.
Yes.
And I want to thank you, and I see Tina. Hello, dear.
Hi, I apologize for my voice. I'm under the weather, but I'm very grateful to be able to share space with all of you today. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, dear. You're a bit late, but if you have a question about regarding the human rights and anything closer to this, because today is the first serial of our seminars, international, and the Pablo was introducing the human rights and the possibility to how we can come from theory to practice.
Yes, yes. My apologies. I did not see the notice in time, but I'm grateful I'm here to listen because I think we don't do enough of that in our world. We don't really listen to hear, we listen to respond. So I'm here to listen and learn. Thank you.
Excellent. You see, because all the techniques and we all have the human right. We are all defenders. I think all mediators and the lawyers who is here with us, we do hope that something will change and that these changes start from us. If nobody have a questions, and I want to say great thank you, Pablo, for sharing your knowledge. I know you will have another seminar in Italian language, and this how we want to come. Yes, this how we want to be equal and to cover all planet and to be more the closer to the humans and to understand and to hear them and respect somehow by the share with the original language. Yes, okay, yes. If you have a question, dear, tell me, Tina.
Yes, I would like to know how we can employ the role of empathy into humanitarian in action, humanitarian efforts in action, as I'm really in real time seeing here in the States agencies that provide absolute desperate and humanitarian aid be dismantled. So I'm wondering about the role of empathy to really feel what people are going through, how to incorporate empathy into our world as a foundation for the efforts that we make. Because I'm seeing a lot of ostracization and tremendous hate, literal erasing of life off of this planet, erasing of culture, value, identity. There's some kind of disconnect, human to human, and it's killing people. I feel like without empathy.
I feel you. I feel you, Tina. Because I'm a psychologist as well, not just a lawyer and mediator. I feel in your voice that it's really affecting you.
Yeah, because I see it. I see.
The Pablo, who you want to answer, me
yes,
or Pablo?
I do feel it. Our lack of empathy and just the othering of people, it makes it so easy to not see what you're doing, that you're hurting others, if you can't feel what someone is going through. Now, as mediators, we have to have boundaries in terms of being able to truly support the people we seek to help. But as human beings, just empathy to understand is more deeper than understanding. We have to feel what the other is suffering, like day-to-day life, what it's like to live like that, to be bearing children, to live like that, and that becomes the norm. It's just morally wrong. So I think we don't have that othering that we do. We don't have empathy. Empathy would make it difficult to other another human being. And so I'm grateful to be here to learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. It's really important what you share, because we have to share our pain and to listen what our colleague and the boundaries are thinking. I agree that most of the situations and the global crisis, it's happened because most of the people, they are losing their faith, is number one. The second, they're losing the morals and the empathies to other human beings. We don't want to listen, but we want to be heard, but opposite side. It's not working like that as a mediator, you know that. So we have to do something. That's why we create these educational seminars, in order to hear and to be heard, to share these feelings and the share emotions and the share fears. My colleagues, psychologists say, and I agree, human being, that's why we are human being and we have feelings. All of them are the same. Despite the color, nationality, we have the same feelings. If we feel sadness, we feel sadness. If we have a scare and the anger, we feel anger. If we feel fear, it means we feel fear. So if we are happy, we are happy. And now I want to just summarize this seminar, and again saying thank you. I want to see more smiles in each of country. We want to unite, not divide people. And this is where we can start to build understand our human rights. And I want to thank each of the presenters here and attendees, Freddy, Pablo, Araceli, Zoraide, everybody who is here. And it's online stream in YouTube, in all of them for their questions. They have a lot. I will share with you, Pablo, direct in email. They have lots of questions. But in the second seminar, exactly about the humanitarian law, we have the speaker, Andrew, who will share. Araceli, who will share again about the human rights, and later in the September. So each of months is covered, but one, two, the great, the brilliant minds, our seminar, the speakers. So you can attend each of months. I will share this, and let's unite. Let's unite and share our emotions. Thanks a lot, and see you next month.
Yes, you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, muchas gracias a todos.
Muchas gracias, excelente charla.
Muchas gracias.
Nos vemos en la